There is a kind of pain no one sees, but it lingers like a wound that never healed. They didn't push you down. They simply pulled their hand away at the exact moment you needed it most. And in that moment, you didn't just lose a relationship, you began to lose yourself. No apologies were given. No explanations were offered. They walked away as if you never mattered. And you're left with questions that have no answer. But Stoicism doesn't teach you to run from that pain. It teaches you to look straight into the wound and understand. Pain is inevitable, but suffering is a choice. You don't control who leaves, but you fully control how you rise. Amid emotional chaos, what matters isn't what they did, but what you choose to do with what remains of you. This is not a story of revenge. It is the journey back to your quiet inner strength, where you learn not to react, but to rule. And that journey begins now. 1. The first reaction is instinct, not the answer. What happens first after being hurt isn't thought, it's reflex. It hits like a spasm in the mind. You want them to feel exactly what you felt. A sharp word, a tear-soaked message, a sentence sharp enough to silence them. In your mind plays a reel of scenarios. What if you confronted them, exposed them, said all the truths they've been hiding from? Retaliation might seem like power, but it's only an impulse disguised as pain. We often confuse reaction with resistance. One is instant, unconscious, and charged with chaos. The other is a conscious choice, guided by reason and dignity. Most of what we regret doesn't come from the pain itself, but from how we rush to respond while still trembling from the wound. Sometimes we don't react because the situation is big, but because the ego is screaming. It says we must be seen, defended, repaid. But do you know what happens when you let instinct act in place of awareness? You don't protect yourself, you only deepen the wound. The Stoics understood this. They didn't aim to be unfeeling, but to delay reaction until the mind returned to clarity. They knew that anger is a form of temporary intoxication, and no one should make decisions while drunk. They let emotions pass like smoke, not suppressing, but not clinging either. Because they understood this, what you do right after the pain will shape you longer than the pain itself. When you react immediately, you hand the reins of your mind to the one who hurt you. You surrender control of your inner world to someone who never valued it. That doesn't just weaken you, it makes you forget that you had a choice. The first reaction is always the animal in you. But if you're patient enough not to answer with a scream, you'll start to hear another voice, softer, yet stronger. It is your own voice, not the wounded ego, but the matured self. It doesn't seek revenge, it seeks healing. It doesn't want to win, it wants to let go. Someone who once understood how pain can swallow an entire life once said, "We suffer not because of what the world does to us, but because of how we tell the story in our minds." Don't let the first reaction write the rest of the story. Let silence ripen, because sometimes the strongest response is not a word, but a silence no one can break. And that is where your true rebirth begins. Not with a strike back, but with a decision not to let old emotions control the new self you are building. That is not weakness, that is sovereignty. Sovereignty over yourself. And from here, the journey of inner mastery begins. 2. Peace is not silence, it's refusal. Have you ever pretended to be fine? Said, "I'm okay," with a crooked smile while something inside you wanted to scream? Have you ever stayed silent to preserve a relationship, to avoid making it a big deal, to prove you're more mature, steadier, less fragile than they think? But the truth is that silence isn't peace. It's resignation masked by calm. It's a storm suppressed, a wound unhealed beneath a fake gloss. Peace doesn't come from pretending you're not hurt. It comes from the moment you decide, I will no longer allow them the power to hurt me again. Peace isn't avoidance. It's not retreating in fear. It's not walking on eggshells to avoid stirring trouble. Peace is an active choice, a clear stance in your inner authority. It doesn't come from calm surroundings. It comes from refusing to let others control the weather in your soul. You don't have to scream, rage, or cut ties loudly to set a boundary. You just need to take a step back, breathe deeply, and whisper to yourself, they no longer have access to the deepest parts of me. That's not coldness, that's clarity. Stoicism doesn't ask you to be numb or rigid. It teaches you to see things plainly, who deserves your energy and who doesn't. A peaceful soul isn't one that's never been hurt, but one that no longer lets pain rule it. No one can control you unless you hand them the keys. There will be people who call you cold when you stop reacting, who say you've changed when you go quiet, who claim you've given up when you pull away. But the truth is, you haven't given up. You've simply let go of what's no longer worth holding, not because you're weak, but because you no longer want to fight for what breaks you. You can't control others' behavior, but you can control the level of access they have to you, and that is the essence of peace. No one can bring chaos into you if you don't open the door. You can't stop people from speaking hurtful words, but you can decide whether to carry those words to bed with you each night. A question to ask yourself: who is living in my mind without paying rent? Every time you allow someone who disrespected you to linger in your thoughts, you're paying for it with your peace. And no one is worth that price. True peace is when you sit in a quiet room, unbothered by someone's last words, not driven to respond, not needing to prove you're okay because you know you are. That is power without noise, strength without declaration. That is the quiet force of a mountain. The Stoics understood that power doesn't lie in controlling others, but in not letting them control you. And they lived by this principle. I cannot make someone act right, but I can choose how I respond. That is the highest human power, the ability to respond with full autonomy. 3. The mind is a home. Don't let them wreck the furniture. Imagine your mind as a home. It is sacred space where you think, feel, and make the most important decisions of your life. A space meant to be protected, nurtured, and refreshed daily with stillness, gratitude, and self-respect. But one day, someone steps in, not with feet, but with a hurtful word, a cold stare, or a silence that denies your worth, and they begin to disarrange everything inside. You don't see cracks in the walls, but you feel the misalignment in your thoughts. You start questioning your worth, digging through the past for mistakes. You begin to doubt all the things you once knew for sure. Did I trust too easily? Am I not enough? Or am I the problem? And day after day, night after night, they're no longer there, but they keep wrecking the interior. Not through action anymore, but through your repetition. Every time you mention them in your thoughts, you reopen the door without checking for a guest pass. Every time you imagine a conversation that never happened, you pull out an empty chair and serve dinner to an expired memory. We often think it's other people's actions that hurt us. But most of the pain comes from keeping them alive in our inner space, even though they're gone. Like letting a guest who once trashed your home still hold a key, still roam your memory, and each time they appear, you can't find stillness in your own soul. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The soul becomes dyed by the color of its thoughts." If you let negative thoughts, unanswered questions, and the image of someone who hurt you replay too often, your inner house will grow darker. Not because someone else flipped the switch, but because you forgot you hold the switch yourself. Look closely. How much energy each day do you spend thinking about someone unworthy of it? How many inner conversations are with someone who never replies in real life? How many times do you wake in the night haunted by a story you no longer live in? And then you wonder why you're tired, distracted, or no longer joyful. The answer lies in this. You've allowed someone else to rearrange the furniture in your home. They're not doing it anymore. Now it's you. You're letting them occupy the most sacred space you have, your mind. What you need is a soft firmness, a gentle but resolute decision. It's when you stand in the center of your mind, look around, and say, "Enough. This is my space, and only those who respect it are allowed inside." No drama needed, no announcement. Just begin by changing how often you think of them. The mind can either be a dwelling or a battlefield. And you are the one who decides who gets to stay, how far they get to go, and who must remain outside. Don't let someone who's no longer present keep smashing your peace. You deserve a shelter undisturbed, a house clean, clear, and bright. Not because no one ever messed it up, but because you've learned how to restore it with awareness, with boundaries, and with a self-respect that no longer bargains. The mind is your home. And now, it's time to change the locks. 4. True victory lies not in noise, but in disappearance. We grow up in a world that glorifies noise. Winning must be visible. It must be witnessed. It must be acknowledged. It must make someone regret, be stunned, or at least realize they were wrong. But you know what real victory isn't as loud as people think. It doesn't come with sound, but with absence. Your silent disappearance from the world that once hurt you is the most powerful statement you'll ever make without saying a word. Because when you stop reacting, they'll call you cold. When you stop participating, they'll say you've changed. When you no longer respond, they'll label you indifferent. But the truth is, you're not going cold. You're waking up. You're no longer shouting in a room where no one listens, no longer explaining yourself to those who chose not to understand from the beginning. Your silence isn't weakness, it is fullness. A person who no longer needs validation will not waste another word. Those who hurt you aren't afraid of your voice. They're afraid of your silence. They don't panic when you're angry. They panic when you stop caring. Because as long as you react, you're still attached. But when you leave that emotional game behind without leaving a single crack, you become something they can no longer manipulate. Seneca once wrote, "The wise do not seek revenge, but retreat from where harm finds easy access." That is not the act of a loser. It's the choice of someone who no longer needs external wins to know they are winning within. Let them misunderstand. Let them retell the story in a way that benefits them. Let them believe you disappeared out of weakness. Because the truth is, they never saw the strongest part of you, the part that knows how to walk away without turning back. That part belongs to you now. True victory isn't in clapping back, in endless conversations, or in finally setting the record straight. It lies in not needing to anymore, not needing them to understand, not needing them to change, not needing an audience. You only need one thing: freedom. And freedom has no sound. It is the empty space you create when you no longer give energy to those who didn't value your presence. It's a disappearance that isn't loud but deep enough for them to feel the void where you once stood. When they expect confrontation, you withdraw. When they anticipate reaction, you simply smile. When they think you'll fall apart, you quietly rebuild yourself stronger than before. This isn't how you prove something to them. It's how you affirm something to yourself. True victory isn't when they realize you were right. It's when you no longer need them to think so to live in peace. And sometimes, what haunts people most isn't what you said, but the absence they can't replace. Disappearance is the final bell not for the relationship, but for the access they once had to your heart. Victory doesn't live in the echo. It lives in the silence no one can fill. And now, you have stepped into that silence not to hide, but to live. 5. Don't let why become a home for suffering. In the end, what lingers most isn't the memory, it's the question. A question with no answer, yet it echoes louder than anything else. Why did they do this to me? You repeat it as if asking one more time might bring clarity, but the more you ask, the deeper you fall into your own shadows. Because not every question needs an explanation. Some only need to be released. You don't hurt because of what happened. You hurt because you don't understand why it happened. And in that absence of logic, you begin to imagine. You create your own scripts. Maybe they never meant it. Maybe you were too soft. Maybe there's something wrong with you you've never seen. But be honest with yourself. Are you trying to understand them, or are you quietly blaming yourself? The question, why, sounds like a search for truth. But more often, it's a trap of obsession. You don't accept what happened, so you try to turn it into a solvable equation. You analyze every detail, rewind every moment, replay every conversation. But hurt is not a math problem. And the one who hurt you probably didn't think that deeply. Stoicism doesn't tell you to deny the question. It teaches you to shift its direction. Instead of asking, why did they betray me? Ask, what will I do with this pain now? Instead of wondering, what wasn't good enough about me? Try, what made me stay this long? These questions don't dig deeper into the wound, they turn you outward. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You may not control what others do, but you can fully control how you respond." The right question won't trap you in the past, it opens a path in the present. You don't need to understand why someone didn't value you. What you need to understand is why you deserve a better life than that. They did what they did. They may have lied, cheated, walked away, or simply stayed indifferent. But your constant turning over of why only gives them free rent in your mind. Every time you ask why, you're keeping them not in reality, but in your nervous system. Try sitting in silence once and accept some questions will never be answered. Not because you don't deserve an explanation, but because some people aren't brave enough to give one. And that's not your fault. Letting go of why isn't giving up. It's liberation. You stop waiting for justice from a place that already broke you. You stop needing to understand them and start understanding yourself. And what you need right now isn't an answer, but inner stillness. Because in that stillness, you're no longer the one left behind. You're the one walking forward. Not because you know everything, but because you no longer need to in order to be free. 6. The story you tell yourself is your greatest power. After all, what shapes you isn't what happened, but the story you tell yourself about what happened. You don't live in the event, you live in the way you remember it. And between truth and memory, there is always space, a space where you can recreate, rewrite, and choose the meaning. When someone hurts you, their action lasts seconds, minutes, or maybe a few days. But what lingers for years is the story you replay in your head. I'm not good enough. I always get left. I deserved this. Those stories don't come from the event, they come from how you silently explain it to yourself. That story becomes the mirror you face each morning, the tone you carry in conversations, and the reason you shrink in later relationships. It isn't the truth. It's just the version you accepted as truth. And you can change that. The Stoics didn't live in fantasy. They didn't deny pain. But they didn't let pain write their identity. They knew the event is objective. But what meaning we assign to it, that is our highest freedom. Epictetus once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you perceive it that causes suffering." You can't change someone leaving, but you can decide whether they take your dignity with them. Look again at the story you're telling. Are you the victim who was abandoned, or the one who chose to walk away upon realizing you deserved better? Are you the betrayed, or the one who finally learned the boundary of your tolerance? Are you the rejected, or the one who escaped what no longer served you? Each question doesn't just reflect the past, it defines your present. The old story may still bring tears, but a new version written with compassion and truth can help you stand. Not to prove something to others, but to remind yourself you're no longer the one lying on the ground. Rewrite it. No need to sugarcoat. Just be fair. Record the event as it happened, no exaggeration, no excuses. Then look at what you're still holding on to, the ending you added. And ask yourself, can I retell this in a way that makes me stronger? If the answer is yes, begin there. No need to wait for the pain to fade. No need for anyone's validation. You only need yourself. You are the author, not a side character. You hold the pen, not the copy of the old chapter. And each trembling word you write now is living proof that you are being reborn. The story you tell yourself is the greatest power you hold, because no one can take it from you. And when that story changes, so do you. Not into someone else, but into your true self. 7. Boundaries are the highest expression of self-love. Not everyone who leaves you hates you, and not everyone who stays truly loves you. In a world full of noise and subtle manipulation, the clearest line between love and exploitation isn't emotion, it's boundaries. And if you don't learn to set boundaries for yourself, sooner or later you'll be worn down by relationships that appear intimate but lack respect at their core. Boundaries are not the rejection of love. They are how you protect the most precious thing, yourself. They are the gentle but firm words, "I deserve kindness." They are how you respond when someone knocks on the door of your mind, not with goodwill, but with control. They are how you rise when a relationship demands your silence as the price for its survival. You are not selfish for saying no. You are not oversensitive for being tired of jokes that cross the line. You are not too difficult for refusing conversations full of judgment and dismissal. On the contrary, you are reminding yourself that your inner peace is not a space open to anyone who feels like rearranging it. In Stoic philosophy, there is a clear belief. The freest person is the one who guards their own boundaries. No one crosses them. No permission needed. That person is neither bitter nor harsh. They simply no longer react to what is no longer worthy. Because they understand self-respect isn't saying, "I'm good." It's living as if it's already true. Some will be angry when you draw boundaries. They will say you've changed, become distant, cold. But that doesn't mean you're wrong. It only means you're no longer easy to hurt. And for those who rely on manipulating others' emotions, that's a loss. But for you, it's freedom. A door with no lock isn't a sign of hospitality. It's neglect. And a heart with no limits isn't a sign of love. It's the sign of someone who hasn't yet learned how to love themselves. Boundaries are how you say, "I matter." Not with shouting, but with how you act when others try to test your resolve. Some boundaries need no explanation, only your consistency. Those who truly love you will understand. Those who seek to use you will fall away. And that is a good thing, because you don't need the whole world to understand your boundaries. You just need to be strong enough not to break them for fear of losing someone. Boundaries are not about keeping people out. They're about keeping yourself in. Not everyone deserves the softness in you. And if you must choose between pleasing others or making peace with yourself, always choose yourself. Because when you start loving yourself through actions, not words, you no longer need anyone to validate your worth. You walk into a room, spine straight, asking no permission to exist. You don't need to be accepted to be present. You exist, and that is enough. Boundaries, in their most refined form, are not fences, they are light. They don't push people away, they reveal the truth. And in that light you realize self-love was never about giving without limits. It was always about knowing what you no longer need to take in. 8. Forgiveness is not giving them a chance. It's giving yourself a way out. There's a quiet but bitter truth. Many of us don't truly forgive. We just silently force ourselves to endure. We say, "It's okay, I've let it go." But our hearts still feel like stone. We continue the relationship as if there were no cracks, but every little gesture is scrutinized under the microscope of doubt. And we call that forgiveness, when really, it's silent suffering that slowly drains us. Forgiveness is not a ticket for them to return. It's not an invitation, not a deal, not a handshake of reconciliation. Forgiveness is you unlocking the chain from your own ankle. It's you telling yourself, "I won't let the past pull me backward one more day." Because the more you cling to resentment, the longer they stay in your mind, even if they've long since left. Many refuse to forgive because they think it's letting them off easy, that they don't deserve mercy, that they should feel guilt, that they should suffer. But that is a dangerous illusion, because the more you wait for them to fall, the more you stand still. The more you hope they realize, the more you bind yourself to expectation, the more you carry anger, the more you bear it daily like hauling stones uphill with no clear destination. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Let others commit wrong, but don't let their wrongs corrupt your soul." Forgiveness doesn't change them, it liberates you. Not because they deserve it, but because you don't want to carry them into your next chapter. Forgiveness is leaving the battlefield without needing to win. It's admitting, this war is not worth one more peaceful moment lost. You can forgive and still cut ties. You can let go without an explanation. Forgiveness does not mean reconciliation. Forgiveness doesn't mean inviting them back into the seat of your heart. It's simply the act of sealing the past, setting it down, and walking forward lighter, not because you forgot, but because you refuse to be led by it anymore. There may never be an apology. They may never acknowledge their wrong. They may live like they never caused harm. Let them. You don't need answers. You need freedom. Forgiveness is choosing the future over staying stuck in the past. It's giving memory back to memory and returning life to your own hands. Forgiveness is never weakness. It is the highest expression of emotional strength. The weak hold on to anger to feel powerful. The strong find peace without needing justice. Forgiveness isn't giving a second chance. It's opening a door, not for them, for you. Because in the end, they're not the ones who need forgiveness. You are the one who needs to lay down that weight to keep living as if life is still worth it. And it is. But you can only enter the next chapter if you're willing to end this one not with bitterness, but with a quiet, resolute whisper. I forgive, but I'm not waiting anymore. 9. Detachment is not coldness, it's consciousness. There's a strange moment after pain, when you're no longer angry, no longer hurt, but no longer feel anything either. It's not that you've stopped loving, it's that you've learned to stop reacting. You see the one who once broke your heart, and your heart no longer flinches. You hear their name, and no one inside you stands up to answer. Detachment is not shutting off emotions. It's choosing not to hand over your emotions to someone who misused them. It's when you decide not to react, just to keep something familiar. When you step back, not because you don't care, but because you care enough not to destroy yourself again. Many won't understand that. They'll say you're indifferent, that you've changed, that you're no longer soft. But they don't see the nights you bit your tongue, the times you swallowed tears to keep the peace. They only see the final stillness, not the storm that once raged beneath it. In Stoicism, detachment is not rigidity, it is the highest form of awareness. You don't detach from the world, you detach from what leads you astray. You don't close your heart. You open another door toward peace. You don't stop feeling, you just stop responding to what is no longer healthy. Someone can leave with their feet, yet stay in your mind through memories, unsaid words, and the wish that they'd understand. But that silent clinging is what traps you. Detachment is when you stop trying to finish a chapter that someone else abandoned long ago. It's when you realize you don't need their understanding to begin healing. Detachment doesn't come from resentment, it comes from clarity. You don't stop because of bitterness, but because continuing would only harm you. You don't need them to see your change. You don't need them to notice how far you've come. You don't walk away for them to look back. You walk away because the road ahead has no room for those stuck in your past. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The mind is at peace when it withdraws from what no longer serves it." That is detachment, a quiet but deliberate act, a refusal without fanfare, a decision without regret. Not to judge anyone, but to protect yourself. You don't need to block them. No declarations on social media. No final words. You simply choose not to participate anymore. You don't react. Don't respond. Don't save a seat for someone who chose to leave. And in that silence, you don't grow weaker, you become free. Detachment is not a failed retreat. It is the deepest form of self-respect. It is the act of someone who no longer lives on validation, but on awareness. And from that quiet place, you begin to live like someone no longer shaken, not because you feel nothing, but because you've chosen to feel with intention. 10. An ending doesn't need applause, only that you don't look back. Not every ending needs the slam of a door. Not everyone who leaves must be sent off with bitter words, and not every farewell needs a goodbye. Sometimes, the real ending happens in silence when you realize you no longer step back, no longer hold on, no longer look behind, hoping someone will change their mind. We often think endings require a clear declaration, a final confrontation, a dramatic act to make the other person see that you've changed. But in truth, it's not action that marks the end. It's the moment you stop hoping that truly ends all attachment. When you no longer wish to be understood, no longer wait for an apology, no longer need to be acknowledged, that's when you've already left, even if your feet are still standing still. In Stoic philosophy, there is no rush in ending. They don't leave in anger. They don't sever ties from pain. They simply recognize that what no longer aligns with reason and dignity must be released, and they let go without sound, without audience. Just a silent step, but a final one. Ending someone's role in your life doesn't mean erasing them from memory. It means no longer letting that memory dictate your decisions today. It's walking forward without waiting for a wave behind you. It's choosing peace over closure. It's no longer forcing yourself to finish a chapter the other person abandoned long ago. You may never get the explanation you hoped for. No one may see the tears you shed that night, and the other person might go on living as if nothing ever happened. But you know. You see it clearly, and you understand. Maturity sometimes isn't about standing up, but about not turning back. Your journey doesn't need to be announced. It only needs your loyalty to it. No one has to validate your choice as right. You only need to know you chose what you needed, not what you were once used to. Because in the end, a true ending is not measured by noise, but by direction. It's not how fast you walk away, but whether you ever look back. And if today you've chosen not to turn around, then congratulations, you've already won. Quietly, but completely. I don't write these words as an outsider, but from the experience of someone who once stayed far too long in a place I no longer belonged. I used to think forgiveness was weakness, detachment was cruelty, and silence was failure. But then I realized what hurts us isn't the wound, it's the way we keep telling that story in the voice of a victim. I learned that letting go doesn't mean losing, it means no longer paying the price for something that can't be saved. And the miracle is this. Peace begins the moment you stop needing others to understand you and start understanding yourself. Not everyone needs to know how you walked away. What matters is that you didn't return. That is victory without applause. And to me, that is the most beautiful definition of freedom. If this journey has reached something deep within you, please like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss what's coming next. Because sometimes, the right words at the right time can save a soul that's quietly seeking direction. And remember, you don't need witnesses to be strong. You only need to walk forward and never look back. See you in the next video.